Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Slavery and Social Death, a Comparative Study with a New Preface, by Orlando Patterson, narrated by Bill Andrew Quinn. Publisher's Note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to visual material present in the print and ebook formats of the book. I felt as I never felt before. It was a glorious resurrection from the tomb of slavery to the heaven of freedom. Frederick Douglass, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Preface, 2018. The study of slavery continues to be a major preoccupation, not only of historians but of scholars across a wide range of other disciplines as well. Slavery and social death has played a crucial role in current multidisciplinary engagement with the subject, but such widespread interest is not new. As David Bryan Davis has shown in his classic study, The Problem of Slavery in Western Culture, slavery has from ancient times been a moral as well as a historical problem. Indeed, one of the most remarkable features of Western civilization is the critical role of slavery at almost all the high points of its development, from ancient Greece to the rise of industrial capitalism. From the early modern Iberian plunder of Africa and the Americas, moral and socio-political issues, most notably the abolitionists and civil rights movements, drove inquiry on the subject. Slavery and Social Death was written in full engagement with the extra-academic values of this historiography, which was all the more pressing in light of my own personal and intellectual background. I grew up in Clarendon, a part of colonial Jamaica where the ubiquitous sugar plantations glowered like geologic fields of memory. Slavery lingered, too, in language. As children, we described the dreaded post-holiday return to school and its whip-happy teachers as our free paper burn, a reference to the manumission certificate of freed slaves. I belonged to the earliest generation of Jamaican students to benefit from the decolonizing period's inclusion of West Indian history in grade school and high school curricula. My very first original work was a study of the Morant Bay Rebellion of 1865 by the emancipated slaves of Jamaica 27 years after abolition. By the time I reached college at the University of the West Indies, my peers and I, in what was the first generation of social science students, were fully mindful of the enormous weight of the slave plantations past and our troubled present. This awareness carried over to the organization of public intellectuals we eventually formed, the New World Group. It was thus a foregone conclusion that my doctoral thesis in sociology at the London School of Economics would be a study of slavery in Jamaica. 3 prior works prepared me for the research and writing of slavery and social death. My first academic work, The Sociology of Slavery, an analysis of the origins, development, and structure of Negro slave society in Jamaica, 1967, the published version of my thesis, based on 3 years of work in the British and Jamaican archives, was my intensive historical field work into the nature, dynamics, and particularities of slavery and the slave experience. It was among the earliest works in the modern English-speaking world to examine slavery in depth from the slave's point of view, exploring in fine detail their socio-cultural, economic, religious, funerary, and familial life over the course of the late 17th, 18th, and early 19th centuries, as well as their psychological responses to enslavement and the modes of violent and nonviolent resistance they employed against the slave system. This was followed by my second major project, Slavery and Slave Revolts, a socio-historical analysis of the First Maroon War, 1655 to 1740, the first detailed study of a series of slave rebellions after the British capture of the island that culminated remarkably in the British suing for peace. The third work that prepared me for the writing of Slavery and Social Death was my third novel, Die the Long Day, 1972, set in 18th century Jamaica. In the absence of historical records, one way to explore the inner lives of slaves is to exercise one's literary imagination. Through fiction, I relived the experiences, thoughts, and feelings of Jamaican slaves, just as Toni Morrison and other neo-slavery novelists would later do with American slaves. Die the Long Day was a novel on the gendered tyranny of slavery, depicting a slave mother attempting to save her daughter from the syphilitic embrace of her slaveholder. By the time I came to write the novel, the reality of slavery in Jamaica as a double death, the demographic nightmare of pervasive physical death reflected in the centrality of the slaves' death rituals in their social life, and the social death of absolute tyranny, natal alienation, and parasitic degradation imposed by masters so heinous that it was normal punishment to force male slaves to eat each other's feces, had already taken place. The title of the novel obviously foreshadowed that of slavery and social death. The devastating human consequences of social death for the slave are described at great length in this book. Although some critics have felt that the phrase social death is too abstract, I believe that it captures, in a real and immediate way, the nature of human suffering and brutalization that slaves experienced. But for those who are unconvinced, let me help by drawing on recent work in social psychology to spell out what it all means in human terms. The eminent psychologist Susan Fiske draws on her own and decades of research in social psychology to show that being human means having 5 core social motives that are essential for psychological and social functioning. The most fundamental of these is the need to belong, within relationships, to kinfolk, and to groups with whom one has strong, stable ties. So powerful is this drive that in Nazi Germany, some Jews passing as Aryans felt the urge to reveal their identity, facing certain death as a result of the need to belong to the Jews. This core motive underlies the 4 other motives: people's need to understand their environment, to be able to predict and make sense of what happens; their need to have some sense of control and competence over outcomes in their lives; their need to view themselves as worthy or improvable, to be able to feel good about themselves, what I refer to as a sense of self-enhancement; knowing they are lovable; and finally, the need to trust, to be able to view others as benign and to see the world as a benevolent place that facilitates group life, attachment, interdependence, and love. The social death of slavery was a prolonged assault on every one of these elementary human needs. Social death did not destroy them, to be sure, for to do so would be to induce insanity and possibly real death, and an insane or dead slave was a useless one. Rather, it hung like the sword of Damocles over the head of every slave who ever lived. Because a slave was human, she wanted desperately to belong to her parents, her kinfolk, and through them to her ancestors. She wanted her children to belong to her, and she wanted those ties to be secure and strong. But all ties were precarious. Her child could be taken away at any moment. So could her lover or permitted husband, her mother, her grandparents, every one of her relatives. It did not matter if this calamitous disruption happened once a week, once a month, or once a year, as the cliometricians, those sharp-eyed accountants of social death, love to calculate. The fact of its possibility was experienced as an ever-present sense of impending doom that shadowed everything, every thought, every moment of her existence. This is the essence of natal alienation, which, in addition to its crushing psychological impact for every individual slave, also entailed their inability as a group to freely integrate the experience of their ancestors into their lives, to inform their understanding of social reality with the inherited meanings of their natural forebears, or to anchor the living present in any conscious community of memory. As for the other fundamental human motives, the devastating impact of the condition of slavery should be so obvious as to hardly need commentary. Frederick Douglass eloquently documented the utter powerlessness of the slaves to decide their own destiny. Slaves made every effort to feel good about themselves and, in their intimate relations, loved and sought to be loved. The claim, made by some commentators, that social death implied that slaves had no social relations, no community, is puzzling and indicates that such critics have simply not read my works with due care. Nonetheless, the ultimate cruelty of slavery was that these relations had no legitimacy outside of what the slaveholder permitted. In light of such fatal uncertainties, all relations were precarious, provisional, and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?